The British monarchy has endured for over 1,000 years, weathering wars, scandals, and the relentless march of modernity. But on a cold November evening in 2024, within the hallowed halls of Buckingham Palace, something occurred that no historian could have predicted and no royal correspondent could have imagined. Princess and the Princess Royal, known throughout the realm as the hardest-working and most discreet member of the family, summoned her brother King Charles III and her nephew Prince William to a private meeting. What she revealed that night would leave two future kings utterly speechless and fundamentally alter the trajectory of the British crown. The meeting had been arranged with extraordinary secrecy. No aides were present, no private secretaries took notes, and even the ever-present palace stewards had been dismissed from the corridor, and at 74 years old, had spent her entire life in service to the crown, never seeking attention, never courting controversy. She was, as one biographer once noted, the safe pair of hands that the monarchy never knew it needed. But on this evening, she would prove to be something far more significant than a reliable royal. She would become the guardian of her mother's final and most surprising wish. For months following Queen Elizabeth II's death in September 2022, and had carried a burden that no one else knew about. Among the late Queen's personal effects, discovered in a locked drawer of her desk at Balmoral Castle, was a letter addressed simply to "my dearest," and the contents of that letter had never been shared with anyone, not with Charles, not with William, not with the late Queen's most trusted advisors, and had kept it close, reading it countless times in private moments, each reading deepening her understanding of her mother's extraordinary foresight. The Queen had written the letter in the final year of her life, at a time when her health was failing, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. In elegant handwriting that, and knew so well, Elizabeth had laid out something remarkable. She had not written about succession laws or constitutional matters. Instead, she had written about the future of the monarchy in deeply personal terms, identifying the one person she believed could carry the institution forward through the turbulent decades ahead. That person was Catherine, Princess of Wales. When Anne finally placed the letter on the table between Charles and William, the room seemed to hold its breath. The king, 76 years old, and still finding his footing after ascending to the throne later than any heir in British history, reached for his reading glasses with trembling hands. William, 42, leaned forward, his athletic frame tense with anticipation. The letter was brief, no more than 2 pages, but every word carried the weight of a woman who had witnessed more history than any other monarch in British history. "The monarchy does not belong to us," Elizabeth had written. "It belongs to the people, and it survives only so long as the people believe in it. I have watched Catherine since she first entered our family. I have observed how she handles pressure, how she raises her children, how she speaks to the elderly and the young, the privileged, and the desperate. She possesses something that cannot be inherited or learned. She possesses authenticity. In my final assessment, I believe she is the one who can lead this family into the future." Charles read the letter twice, his face cycling through emotions that Anne had rarely seen on her brother's usually composed features. First came confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked remarkably like fear. William, meanwhile, had gone completely still. His eyes remained fixed on the paper long after he had finished reading, as if hoping that additional words might materialize, words that would make this revelation easier to understand or accept. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Outside, the fog that had settled over London seemed to press against the palace windows, muffling the distant sounds of traffic and the occasional siren. Inside, the only noise was the steady tick of a grandfather clock that had stood in that room since Queen Victoria's reign. Finally, Charles spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "She never mentioned this to me. Not once. And had prepared herself for this moment. She had rehearsed what she would say. But when the time came, she found that her mother's words spoke for themselves. She wanted you to understand something, Charles. She wanted you to see that the crown cannot simply be passed from heir to heir anymore. The world has changed. People need to feel connected to the monarchy not just respect it from a distance. Mother believed that Catherine could create that connection. William finally looked up from the letter and saw something in his expression that she had never seen before. It was not jealousy, as some might have expected. It was something far more complex. It was the look of a man realizing that everything he had been taught about his destiny might need to be reconsidered. She wants Catherine to be queen, William said slowly. Not just queen consort. Queen, in her own right. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Charles stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to his sister and his son. For a long moment, he said nothing. When he finally turned around, his eyes were glistening. Mother always saw things that others missed, he said. She saw the cracks in the empire before anyone else. She saw the Commonwealth's changing feelings before anyone else. And now, it seems, she saw something about the future of our own family that we were too blind to recognize. What made the Queen's message so extraordinary was not just its content, but its timing. Elizabeth had written it at a moment when Catherine was facing one of the most difficult periods of her royal life. The Princess of Wales had been subjected to intense media scrutiny, relentless comparisons to her predecessor Princess Diana, and the pressure of raising 3 young children in an unrelenting spotlight. Yet through it all, she had never complained, never lashed out, never sought sympathy. She had simply continued her work with quiet determination. The late Queen had noticed something else as well. In the months before her death, Elizabeth had watched Catherine navigate the complicated dynamics of a family that was increasingly fractured. Prince Harry's departure for California, the public airing of grievances, the accusations of racism and neglect, all of it had threatened to tear the Windsor family apart. While others reacted with anger or defensiveness, Catherine had responded with grace. She had maintained her relationship with Harry privately, reached out to Meghan Markle in ways that never became public, and protected her children from the chaos swirling around them, and explained all of this to Charles and William as they sat in the flickering lamplight of the palace room. She told them about conversations she had witnessed between the Queen and Catherine, private moments when the 2 women had discussed everything from child-rearing to constitutional crises. Mother trusted her and said simply, not because she was married to William, not because she was the mother of future kings. Mother trusted her because she saw herself in Catherine, someone who understood that duty comes before everything else. Charles returned to his chair, looking older than his 76 years. He had waited his entire life to become king, and now, barely 2 years into his reign, he was being confronted with the possibility that his mother had envisioned a very different future than the one he had imagined. What exactly are you suggesting? And he asked, are you saying we should change the succession? That Catherine should reign instead of William? That would require an act of Parliament, a constitutional crisis. And shook her head firmly. I'm not suggesting anything, Charles. I'm telling you what Mother wrote. She wasn't trying to change the law. She was trying to change how we think about leadership within the family. She wanted us to recognize that Catherine's voice should carry as much weight as any king's. She wanted us to prepare the country for a future where the monarchy is led by a partnership, not a hierarchy. William had been listening in silence, but now he spoke with an intensity that surprised both his father and his aunt. She's right, you know. About Catherine, I've seen it myself, every day for 20 years. She connects with people in a way I never could. When she visits a hospital, patients cry because they feel seen. When she speaks about mental health, young people listen because they know she's not just reading a speech. She's lived it. The revelation about Catherine's impact was not hyperbole. By 2024, the Princess of Wales had become arguably the most popular member of the royal family. Polls consistently showed her approval ratings exceeding those of Charles and even William himself. Her work on early childhood development had attracted international attention, and her quiet advocacy for mental health awareness had reached millions of young people who had previously shown little interest in the monarchy. But it was not just her public work that had earned the late Queen's admiration. It was the way Catherine had handled personal adversity. When her husband's brother had publicly attacked the family, she had remained silent. When tabloids published invasive photographs of her, she had responded with dignity rather than lawsuits. When her own health challenges emerged, she had faced them privately, never seeking sympathy or special treatment. The Queen had written about all of this in her letter. Catherine has been tested in ways that few people know, Elizabeth had written. She has faced cruelty from the press, betrayal from those she trusted, and the impossible pressure of raising children who will never know a normal life. Through every trial, she has emerged stronger, kinder, and more committed to service. That is the quality that cannot be taught. That is the quality that will save this family. As the night wore on, the three royals continued their conversation. Charles, initially resistant, began to understand what his mother had seen. He remembered the early days of Catherine's relationship with William, when the press had mocked her as Waity Katie and her middle-class background had been treated as a scandal. He remembered how she had weathered that storm without complaint, how she had waited 8 years for William to propose, how she had never once pressured him or his grandmother for more than they were willing to give. "She has patience," Charles said finally, "more patience than any of us. I lost my temper with the press countless times. William has done the same. But Catherine? She simply absorbs it and moves forward. That's not weakness. That's extraordinary strength." William nodded slowly. He was thinking about his own mother, Diana, and how differently she had handled similar pressures. Diana had fought back against the institution that she felt had betrayed her, giving television interviews and writing letters that would later become public. Catherine had chosen a different path. She had worked within the system, earned trust rather than demanded it, and slowly, quietly transformed how people saw the monarchy, and watched her brother and nephew process the Queen's message. She knew that nothing would change immediately. The line of succession was established by law, not by letter. Charles would remain king, William would eventually succeed him, and George would follow in due course. But the Queen's message was not about legal succession. It was about something far more important. It was about influence, respect, and the recognition that the future of the monarchy might depend less on who wore the crown and more on who stood beside it. "There's something else," and said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a second piece of paper, smaller than the first, folded carefully. "Mother wrote this specifically for Catherine. She asked me to deliver it when the time was right. I think the time is right now." Charles and William exchanged glances. Neither asked to read the second letter. Some things, they understood, were meant only for Catherine. The Princess of Wales was at Kensington Palace that evening, likely putting her children to bed, unaware that her future was being reshaped in a room 20 miles away. She would receive the letter in the morning, read it in private, and likely never speak of its contents to anyone outside her husband. What the Queen had written to Catherine remains unknown, known only to the princess herself and perhaps to Anne, who would never reveal its contents. But those who know Catherine well say that she read it with tears streaming down her face, held it to her heart, and then placed it in a drawer where she keeps her most treasured possessions. She never mentioned it to anyone, not even William, though he suspected what it contained. In the days that followed the secret meeting, subtle changes began to emerge in how the royal family operated. Charles began including Catherine in strategic discussions that had previously been reserved for male heirs. William started publicly acknowledging his wife's counsel in ways he never had before. And ever the pragmatist, simply continued her work, satisfied that her mother's final wish had been heard. The British public, of course, knew nothing of the letter or the meeting. They continued to see Catherine as they always had, a graceful princess who smiled warmly at cameras and knelt comfortably on hospital floors to speak with children. But those who watched closely noticed something different. There was a new confidence in how Catherine carried herself, a new authority in how she spoke. She was no longer just William's wife or George's mother. She was something more, something the late Queen had recognized long before anyone else. As for Charles and William, the revelation changed their relationship in ways neither had expected. The knowledge that Elizabeth had seen something in Catherine that she had not seen in either of them could have created resentment. Instead, it created something closer to relief. The pressure of carrying the monarchy alone, the weight of 1,000 years of history pressing down on their shoulders, suddenly felt slightly lighter. They did not have to be perfect. They did not have to be everything to everyone. Catherine would help carry the load. The Queen's letter remains locked away, perhaps to be revealed in some future biography, or perhaps to remain private forever. But its impact has already been felt. In the years since that November evening, Catherine's role within the family has expanded dramatically. She has taken on responsibilities traditionally reserved for the sovereign, representing the crown at major international events and speaking on issues that transcend party politics. She has done so with the same quiet grace that first caught Elizabeth's attention. And Charles and William? They have found a new respect for each other and for the woman who binds their family together. The night when Princess and made them speechless taught them something that no amount of royal training could have provided. It taught them that leadership is not about birthright or hierarchy. It is about character, compassion, and the ability to inspire hope in those who have lost it. Catherine possessed those qualities in abundance. The late Queen had seen it. Now, finally, her husband and her father-in-law saw it too. The British monarchy has survived for centuries by adapting to change, by recognizing when tradition must yield to necessity. Queen Elizabeth II understood this better than anyone. In her final message, she ensured that the institution she loved would continue to evolve, guided by a woman who never sought power but who proved, through years of quiet service, that she deserved it. Princess, and faithful to the end, delivered that message. And two kings, humbled and astonished, received it. The future of the crown had never looked more secure or more surprising.